Senator Kamala Harris will be Joe Biden's running mate. The California lawmaker becomes the first Black woman and the first Asian American woman to be chosen as a major party's vice presidential candidate. Joe Biden's campaign made the announcement via text message to supporters Tuesday. The pair is expected to appear together Wednesday in Wilmington, Delaware. In a tweet after the announcement, Harris said she was honored to be on the Democratic ticket, adding that Joe Biden will, quote, build an America that lives up to our ideals. Joining me now are CBS News' Natalie Brand, Nancy Cordes, and Lynda Tran. Nancy is CBS News chief congressional correspondent. Lynda is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. And Natalie Brand joining us there from the White House North Lawn as well. Lynda, let me start with you. Talk to us a little bit about what Senator Kamala Harris, from your perspective, brings to the Biden campaign.
Well, Elaine, in a word, it's enthusiasm. I mean, there's nothing like building a historic ticket in order to get voters really excited about casting their ballots, whether that happens to be at the ballot box or in the mailbox come fall. And that's obviously something that is going to be critically important. It would have been important in any election, but in this cycle in particular, as we have this ongoing, very real public health considerations with the pandemic, and then also a concerted effort that's been underway by the sitting president and his campaign machine to kind of undermine the electoral process. It's very important that people get excited about turning out for that ballot. The other thing that Vice President Biden is getting with Senator Harris is in many ways a prototypical vice presidential candidate. She is somebody who is clearly extraordinarily sharp and intellectual. She has a compelling personal story. And because of her prosecutorial background, she also can very easily fill that traditional attack role that has been accorded to the running mate on the presidential ticket. So there's a lot there that the vice president, the former vice president's team is getting, and you can bet they're pretty excited about the reaction they're having right now.
Natalie, let me turn to you. We've already seen the Trump campaign come out and attack Harris for, quote, embracing the radical left. What's the strategy behind that?
Well, that's a major criticism that we've seen this afternoon from the Trump campaign and also the president himself. Shortly after this announcement was made, the president was asked about Kamala Harris being chosen as the running mate during his press briefing Tuesday evening, and he called Harris his #1 draft pick and also said that she didn't perform well in the primaries, but was expected to do so. You might remember she actually didn't get a chance to go before the voters in the early states during the primaries because she ended her presidential bid in December before Iowa had its caucuses. So we still don't have a real test among the voters of how she would have done during the presidential primary earlier this year. But we've already seen from the president and the Trump re-election campaign attacks against not only Harris, but Biden for, quote, handing the reins over to Harris and saying that she will really control this ticket is their claim and accusation, and calling her part of the radical left, pointing out some of her policy positions on the Democratic primary campaign trail and also in the U.S. Senate, and the president even mentioning some key swing states and asking how those states would react to some of those policies. So I think we'll continue to see that as a major criticism. We've also seen the Trump campaign bring out some of her record as a former prosecutor and California attorney general, which has been scrutinized in the past, especially by progressives. So I think we're going to see the Trump campaign really kind of try to bring out attacks from all different directions, realizing that this is a key part of the presidential ticket now. And really, we may see them go after Kamala Harris just as much as they go after Joe Biden. Elaine.
Well, Nancy, you have been covering Senator Harris on Capitol Hill. What can you tell us about her record as a lawmaker?
You know, Elaine, often when a new lawmaker comes to Capitol Hill, as Kamala Harris did in early 2017, it can take a while to kind of find your footing and make your mark. This is a community of extroverts all looking to get attention. But she didn't have any problem with that because, as she showed very early on, she was so adept at grilling witnesses in these big blockbuster hearings because of her prosecutorial background that her interrogations, if you will, often went viral from her very early days as a senator sitting on the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Intelligence Committee, grilling major Trump officials, two attorneys general, deputy attorney general, Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court nominee. Her questions were so direct often that they rattled the lawyers that she was interrogating. These were people who had a lot of experience themselves, but former Attorney General Jeff Sessions famously said that she was making him nervous with her questions. Early on, there were a couple of Republican colleagues who didn't like her rapid-fire style, even though that style wouldn't have been all that unusual had it been employed by one of their male colleagues, but they interrupted her. They told her to let the witness finish answering her questions. That kind of died out after a while, but those exchanges cemented her reputation as someone who was A, somewhat fearless, and B, quite prepared for a lot of these, of these hearings where you only get about 5 minutes to really get some of your biggest questions answered. And so Democrats are hoping that that skill in the courtroom, on the debate stage, in hearing rooms, will translate into a strong debate performance against Vice President Mike Pence, because that will really be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, high-profile endeavors that she undertakes over the next 3 months or so, is to go up against the vice president. She'll have one opportunity to do it. It didn't go that well for Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton's pick, back in 2016. Democrats believe that she will have a stronger showing in 2020.
Lynda, I'm reminded of last summer during that first Democratic primary debate when Senator Harris went after Joe Biden quite forcefully on this issue of busing. It was one of those moments. I remember sitting around the CBSN table and thinking, I wonder how this is actually going to land. That was a memorable moment. But what does Biden's choosing Kamala Harris now say about this issue when it comes to racial issues, when it comes to these matters of racial equality, that he has chosen her at this point in 2020?
Yeah, Elaine, I mean, that moment that you just highlighted is certainly going to be replayed in coverage over the coming days. And also, I'm willing to bet is going to be taught in college and university classrooms for years to come. But what it doesn't show is the relationship that they had going into that. It doesn't share with us the close relationship she had with his son, Beau, who was, as we know, the Delaware State Attorney General. And so they had a longstanding relationship that preceded that, and a lot of trust, we imagine, between the two of them that will play very well into this next phase of this campaign and also into governing beyond it if they were to win come November through the end of the year here, depending on how long the analysis plays out. But as you point out, Elaine, the moment that we're in right now is unprecedented on so many levels. It's not just an issue for Black communities or broader Black and brown communities in the United States. The wake of what we've seen play out after George Floyd and the kneeling on his neck is something that has really united people all around this country from lots of different walks, certainly the progressives, certainly Democrats, but also independents who are concerned about systemic racial injustice. And Joe Biden choosing Kamala Harris sends a very, very strong message about his commitment and what it's probably going to look like under a Biden presidency.
You know, Natalie, I wonder, what is it that we have been hearing from the president and his campaign about the issues that he wants to emphasize right now? Obviously, we have seen polls that show many Americans do not approve of his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. But we've seen the president, for instance, hold events at the White House in recent days and weeks, talking about supporting law enforcement, for instance. What is it that we have seen most recently the president emphasize and really try to highlight?
Well, I think some of the key issues that we're going to continue to hear about all campaign season long will be this debate over criminal justice reform and police reform, where there have been clear stated differences across the two different sides. Now that we have the two complete tickets, we know that that is a big issue that will continue to get a lot of oxygen, as well as, of course, the economy, which has been the cornerstone of the Trump re-election campaign. Already today, we heard the president talking about Kamala Harris wanting to raise taxes and aligning her with what he and the campaign call the radical left. Taxes, Green New Deal, some of the issues that would really rev up his conservative base. And so what we're seeing is him speaking to his base. And as Lynda was talking about earlier, Kamala Harris will definitely excite progressives. So now the question becomes, how do these two different tickets try to reach out to the moderate voters in the middle? And how do they try to hone their message to speak to them if right now the two sides are being painted as extremes? And how does that play out in these key battleground states, especially across the Midwest and Rust Belt?
You know, Nancy, Natalie brings up an interesting point about, the characterizations, obviously, now beginning as this pick and the news of this pick becomes more widely absorbed. I wonder what you've been hearing from Democrats and Republicans about this, because already we saw within, 30 minutes or so of this announcement, the president tweeting with a ready-made ad, an attack ad against Kamala Harris, talking about her being in sync with the quote-unquote radical left, as he put it.
Sure, and that is not surprising because I think Democrats and Republicans alike both assumed that she was the most likely choice to be vice presidential nominee for Joe Biden. And so Democrats were kind of watching and waiting, but figuring that she had the best shot, and Republicans were doing the same. And so they had all their ammunition ready to go, and that ad is a case in point. But Democrats believe that, it's okay if they take aim at her for those reasons. First of all, they think that that's kind of a tired playbook on the part of the Trump administration. The president has been doing that all year. He's been arguing that any number of people, Bernie Sanders or AOC or name your progressive here, are all pulling Joe Biden to the left. That's been a challenging case to make because Joe Biden has a decades-long reputation as something of a centrist. So those attacks haven't really landed. And it's a little tricky with Kamala Harris as well, because while she is from a big progressive state, California, she also has this law enforcement background and frankly has faced some frustration from progressive groups in the past who didn't feel that she was far enough to the left when it came to some law enforcement issues. And so she has really tried to walk that divide very carefully over the past few years. And she's clearly a choice that was made because the Biden campaign felt that she could energize the base. And she wasn't someone that they were picking because they thought that she would deliver a state like Tim Kaine in Virginia, for example, back in 2016. They're pretty sure they're going to win California in the fall, but they believe that she's in some ways the yin to Joe Biden's yang. She is a younger candidate, 55, 56 years old. He's one of the oldest presidential candidates ever. She is a relatively new face in the Senate. She's only been around for a couple of years. He's obviously got decades of experience in Washington. And so, they think that this ticket provides some contrasts that serve them for the better. But it's not surprising that the Trump campaign will try to try to make the case that those contracts are for the worse.
All right, we will be watching oh so closely when the two appear in Delaware, Senator Harris and Joe Biden. All right, Nancy Cortez, Natalie Brand, and Lynda Tran, so great to see you all. Thank you very much.
Good to see you too.